Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Youth Church. We're so glad that you've decided to join us this morning, and we have a special morning in store for you. So the whole youth team worked together this morning for Youth Church, so I'm going to play a game with you. Tim is going to do an amazing Bible reading for you. John and some others from our youth team have put together some amazing worship. Katie's going to teach us a little bit this morning from the book of Psalms, and Catherine's going to do a response for us. So we have a lot of exciting stuff happening this morning, and we are so excited that you're here with us this morning. So would it really be Youth Church without playing a silly game? So this morning we are going to play a round of Bendy Bob. I know, you're excited, I'm excited, it's gonna be great. So I have here one of my favorite childhood toys, and said favorite childhood toy is going to be acting out some different things that you have to guess. So hopefully you'll join in, enjoy guessing, and definitely enjoy some good laughs. Here we go. So I'm not actually sure if you're allowed to use props when you play Bendy Bob, but it definitely helped me out. So hopefully you enjoyed that and got several of those correct. And today we are talking about a really famous psalm in the Bible, Psalm 23. And each of those words that you needed to guess all have something to do with Psalm 23. So hopefully you had a little bit of fun with that game and you'll enjoy the rest of this morning.
This is Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. Yes! Come on, England! He's one of our own. He's one of our own. Harry Kane is one of our own. Oh, yeah. Hi. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. Okay, well, it's a river, but let's pretend it's a stream. He renews my strength. Ah! He guides me along the right paths. Okay, that's left. Right, this is right. Right path. Let's go. Bringing honour to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest alley. Alley. Oh, it's valley. Dang it, this'll have to do. Even when I walk through the darkest alley, I will not be afraid, because I know you are beside me. Your rod and staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. Up, awkward. You honour me by anointing my head with oil. Not that much! What are you doing? Goodness. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. Just ignore that unicorn.
Chains. Every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before Him. So open up the gates, make way before the King of Kings. To save, He's here to set the captives free. For who could stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power, fighting our battles. Every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains. Every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before Him. Who could stop the Lord Almighty? 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 Who could stop the Lord? Our God is a Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power, fighting our battles.
psalm, David refers to God as his shepherd. This isn't unusual, as God is often referred to in the Bible as a shepherd, with Jesus even calling himself the Good Shepherd. David knew a lot about being a shepherd because he was one before he became king. If you see how we farm sheep, shepherds drive the sheep from behind, often rounding them up with a sheepdog. But in the Middle East, where David was a shepherd, the shepherd walks ahead and the sheep follow. It's this wonderful picture of God leading us. And in saying this, David recognises that he himself has the nature of a sheep. Sheep are renowned for wandering off, getting lost and getting into trouble. David is recognising that we sometimes wander away from God, but in doing so we get ourselves into trouble and into danger. Another thing about shepherds is that they know a lot about taking care of their sheep, and that's essentially what David says next. He says that he shall not want, meaning all his needs are satisfied by the shepherd. But also, interestingly, it could be a decision to not want more than what he is given. And he describes how God makes him lie down in green pastures and leads him by still waters. God knows how to take care of us. He knows when we need rest, and he knows how to give us that rest. A sheep may not always know what's best for it, but the shepherd does. God knows what is best for us. Whilst looking into all of this, I learnt that sheep will not lie down if they're hungry or if they're nervous or afraid. So in referring to lying down, David is saying that the shepherd has dealt with that fear so that the sheep can rest. Throughout the psalm so far, David has painted a very pretty picture. But then he goes on to talk about walking through the valley of the shadow of death. He recognises that life isn't always easy. While following the shepherd, we may go through tough times and difficult situations. A valley of the shadow of death certainly sounds frightening. And David declares that he won't fear because he knows that God is always with him. We don't have to fear because God is with us. I don't know if it's the same for you, but if I walk down a dark street alone, I'll probably be quite afraid. In fact, at one point, whilst parked in a dark side street in Middlesbrough, I thought I was going to be killed by a man in an Iceland van. But then, walking back to my car with Catherine and Caroline, I wasn't scared at all because I wasn't alone. If I was walking through the scariest place on earth, but I was walking alongside Jesus, I wouldn't be afraid. So then knowing that the presence of God is always with us should make walking through something difficult like a valley of the shadow of death a lot less scary. Notice that David doesn't call it the valley of death, but rather the valley of the shadow of death. He's not necessarily facing actual death, but the shadow of it. It's scary and it's dark, but we don't have to fear death because of Jesus. Jesus took our place and faced the full reality of death so that we don't have to. Jesus died so that we might live. He then says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." Again, David appreciates that he will face enemies. He knows he will face hardship, but he's also saying that he can experience the goodness of God in the midst of all that. It describes the provision and care of God, even in the presence of his enemies. We can still experience God's care and his goodness, even when we face enemies. God still cares for us in that. That might not necessarily mean the elimination of our enemies, but like David, we can experience God's goodness through it anyway. This psalm is often used at funerals, as it's very comforting to those nearing the end of their life on earth or to those who have recently lost someone. But it's actually just as relevant in life. It's about all of life. The shepherd leads us through life, not just death. David even says, "Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life." For all his life on earth and then after, David is certain that he will enjoy the presence of God. He says, "I will dwell in the house of God forever." This is a really well-known psalm and one that is good to memorise. There are some song versions of it, which is how I learnt it. It's really helpful and encouraging to know it by heart, because then when you face these tough situations, You have it there ready. You can remind yourself of those truths about God's care and his goodness, and you can pray it over yourself and others.
Thank you so much, Katie. We are now going to respond in prayer to what we've just heard. But before we do that, you're going to need just a couple of things. You're going to possibly need a pen and a piece of paper, and you're also going to need a tiny little bit of oil. The type of oil that you can find in your kitchen is perfect for this, but you might need to ask a parent or a carer to help you to get that. And by a little bit, I mean you really only need just a tiny bit in the bottom of a cup or a glass or something like that. So you might want to pause this video and go and find that, and then come back for the response. So I love the bit of Psalm 23 that says, "You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Did you know that anointing with oil was a symbol of both healing and calling? So when looking after the sheep, the shepherd would check the sheep for wounds when leading them back to the sheepfold. And the shepherd would apply oil to any cuts and scrapes and scratches that the sheep might have. And this oil would have a healing and refreshing effect for the sheep. Jesus, our shepherd, gives us times of rest, healing and refreshment when we are suffering. During the next few moments, I'm just going to play some quiet music, and I want to ask you to name before Jesus the ways in which you feel you're suffering or struggling right now. These might be physical things that you want to ask for healing for, or you may feel like you need to be healed emotionally or in some other way. You might want to pray out loud and name them before him vocally, or you might want to write these things down on the pen and paper that you've got as a prayer, and ask Jesus, the Good Shepherd, to bring healing in your life. Just like the shepherd calls a lost sheep back to himself, God also calls us. He calls you. He has a calling and a purpose set aside for every single one of us, and God guides us along that path. So I want to invite you now to use a bit of the oil that you've hopefully got and make the sign of the cross on your forehead, or if you prefer, the back of your hand. And just remember as you do that, that God heals, and that you are called by him, and you have a God-given purpose. Remember as you do it that you belong to God, and that God shepherds you, and he calls you his own. Finally, you may want to just take a few moments now to ask God, what are you calling me to do?
Fullness of eternal promise, stirring in your sons and daughters, earth revealing heaven's wonders. Spirit come, Spirit come. What you spoke is now unfolding. children shall be holy. Dreams awaken in this moment. Spirit come, Spirit come. Pour it out, let your love run over. Here and now, let your glory fill this house. Pour it out, let your love run over. Here and now, let your glory fill this house. Now the world awaits your presence, and His power is within us. We will rise to be your witness. Spirit come, Spirit come. Pour it out, let your love run over. Here and now, let your glory fill this house. Pour it out, let your love run over. Here and now, let your glory fill this house. Tongues of fire, testifying of the Son, one desire. Spirit come, speak revival. Prophesy like it is done, one desire. Spirit come, Spirit come. Let our hearts continue beating, for our King is soon returning. As we hold to this assurance, Spirit come, Spirit come, Spirit come, Spirit come. Pour it out, let your love run over. Here and now, let your glory fill this house. Pour it out, let your love run over. Here and now, let your glory fill this house. Tongues of fire, testifying of the Son, one desire. Spirit come, speak revival. Prophesy like it is done, one desire. Spirit come, Spirit come. Spirit come.
All right, guys, well, we absolutely love that you've joined us this morning for Youth Church, and we hope that you feel really encouraged and refreshed for the week ahead. Happy summer to you all, because it's officially summer break, and we look forward to continually keeping up with you on social media. Make sure you're following us and keeping up with everything that's happening. We'll see you later on this week.